Likkutei Sichot, Volume 2, Parshas Teitzei.
If you go out to war.
If you do.
Right. It's not talking about getting married.
But many times when it says ki, it means when. Okay. פרשתנו מתחילה בפסוק כי תצא למלחמה לאויביך ונתנו השם אלוקיך בידך ושבית שביו. When you go out to war on your enemy specifically, and Hashem will. So that's the sublimation of it, right? Sometimes you have actual enemies. Sometimes you're your own worst enemy. Who's you? The evil inclination in you, the animal soul. Here he's going to say it even stronger.
He's a cunning enemy.
Yeah, because you think it's you. He makes you think it's you. He makes you identify with him. And Hashem, your God, will deliver him in your hands, and you will capture from those that he captured. That's not the pshat, but I already gave the Jewish. What does this mean spiritually? Again, sublimating it and asking, what does this mean spiritually?
Why did you say sublimating it? Why did it just mean translating it? Sublimate means to take a liquid and turn it into a gas. So
that's in chemistry.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, what do you mean when you say that? I really never heard that expression.
To sublimate is like to rectify, but in the psyche. So when you have a process that's going on, and it's happening in more difficult, in a more difficult environment, and you change the effect so that it's occurring in a more positive environment, that's called sublimation. So in this case you have an evil inclination who's your enemy, and you have an actual physical enemy. I'll say it instead of saying it here, I'll say it how we would like it to happen. The opposite of sublimation is when you become extreme, you become fundamentalist. So Islam, for instance, is a fundamentalist religion. Why? Because there's very, very little speaking of an evil inclination in their writings. Now, their writings were written 600, 700 years after the destruction of the temple. We had been talking about 600, 650, whatever.
It was in about 600 the temple
Yeah.
destroyed in thousands of
What?
The temple was destroyed in 60.
No, 70.
He wrote it in about 600.
Yeah.
It's about 1400 years.
Right. From 60 to 600 is 540.
Okay, working backwards. Okay, yeah.
Anyway, at that time we had been talking about the spiritual meaning of the Torah for about 1,000 years. Christianity was a failed attempt to use that sublimation that we have been creating to market Torah basically to the non-Jews, and it became what it became. So instead of building upon that, and he claimed, their prophet claimed he claimed that he accepted Yiddishkeit and he accepted Christianity and he understood that the God was one and so on. But when it came to his understanding of what this all meant, you could see that he was like living 2,000 years earlier. He was so primitive in his understanding. It's not even. That's the level that we're at.
I
there.
always thought that this whole business was just simply a piece of sugar on top of the chocolate, and he really wanted to kill all the Jews. He really wanted them. So he said, "Yeah, they're nice people. As long as
No, but that's a different part of it. That's the specific Jews that he knew, and he wanted to conquer them and so on. But I'm talking here about his understanding of the scriptures, how he understood things. He had no ability to understand that. He understood the pshat. Pshat's pretty simple. Pshat here says you have an enemy, go conquer him. Okay, go fight a war. You need sometimes to fight a war. But after the temple was destroyed and we had no political clout, let's call it, we had no political currency as a people, So very quickly, and it wasn't just then, it was long before, I'm saying about 500 years earlier, we had already understood that as much as the Torah is talking about conquering a physical enemy, it was talking about conquering the enemy within. So we've been talking about this for 1,000 years before he came along, and he did the reverse. He went back and said everything that could be interpreted as a spiritual battle, he turned it back into a physical battle. So that's the fundamentalism. That you have no sublimation. And like what we try to do now when we think about Islam is how do you get them to sublimate again? How do you get them to do the process that we did 2,500 years ago? To understand that the real battle is inside you. And the battle is not about fighting an enemy on the outside. Sometimes there is. I'm not saying that there's not. But to build your whole life around that, and that there's no room for sublimation, that's fundamentalism. That's the opposite. That's a person who's sick. Who's sick in his psychology is sick because it's immature. It hasn't built up yet. He doesn't understand yet.
The Arabs are primitive people.
Some of them are, and some of them aren't. They're beginning to understand this. It's not completely without hope. There are some of them that begin, especially those who have come in contact with the Western world, where these sublimations have happened much more strongly. So they begin to understand this. This is an interesting topic in and of itself. But anyway, in Yiddishkeit, this is an old thing. That oivecha hem haguf v'hanefesh habehemit. That your real enemies, again, in the spiritual sense, are the body and your animal soul. Now, it's very interesting that he writes here the body, because he wouldn't say the body is your enemy. But in a certain sense it is. The body is the enemy. Why? Because the body has its needs. And it convinces you that that's what you need to pursue in life. It convinces you very strongly.
Who's the one who's encouraging you towards tigers?
Yeah, the body.
Gashmi,
yeah.
And also on the level of relationships and so on and so forth. That's the Yetzer Hara, or that's the body? No,
so that's the Yetzer. When you say a taiva, you're already talking about the Yetzer Hara, usually. Unless you're talking, like there's a lot of discussion about this in Mayan, and many Kuntrasim talk about this. Tanya mentions this already, that because you've used your body many years to fulfill its needs, not even its cravings, just needs. And those needs were permissible. You ate, you slept. So just by fulfilling them, fulfilling the needs, the basic needs, you become susceptible to cravings. It's just a natural thing that happens. Because
you'd be dead if you didn't eat.
Yeah, that's one side of it, and that's what the body keeps claiming. And we keep believing. And even if it is true, let's say it is true, you eat exactly the amount that you need. Still, fulfilling that need causes you to get used to fulfilling what the body tells you. And then you can't tell the difference anymore. Because really these cravings, they come from the animal soul. So it says that the animal soul of a Jew has cravings only for permissible things. It won't want something that's not permissible.
The animal soul
of a Jew only wants things that are permissible according to Torah. It will never eat treif. It's not interested in treif. It has no need for it. But it would very much like a bucket of Badat's ice cream in the middle of the night. Why not? Why shouldn't I just down 3,500 calories in one sitting? So what if I kill my pancreas? Doesn't know the difference, doesn't care. That's a craving, that comes from the animal soul. But even if you want a little bit of ice cream, it's from the animal soul. And the animal soul is strengthened every time you fulfill the body's needs. It's a very difficult state. But because of that, the body is your enemy, not because it's plotting against you, but just by keeping it alive, you're strengthening the need for cravings. Just by keeping it alive, even without going beyond what you need.
I have to raise a question.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's not suitable for the tape, but never mind.
The whole beginning wasn't suitable for the tape, so it's fine. We're in good ground here.
It's the nature of men especially to look at people of the opposite sex, right? And have desires.
No.
But that's not permitted. A married man is not permitted to look, for example, at a married woman and say, that's what it's so dibros. So how do you say that comes from the nefesh of the keys? How can that possibly be that? Because it's mamish against Torah. That's the Yitzhara. Even if you don't intend to do anything, even if you say to yourself, well, it's also because she's married, or whatever it is, nevertheless, the very fact there's a desire shows that it doesn't come from
so Aseres Dibros have two types of Dibros in it. I don't remember someone making this division, but it clearly exists there. There are parts of the Aseres Dibros that are for the animal soul, the Jewish animal soul, and there's parts of the Aseres Dibros that are for foreign influences on the animal soul. For instance, lo tisa et Shem Hashem Elokecha lashav, or lo yelecha elokim acharim al panai. That's avodah zarah, and it's blasphemy. Those two things the Jewish animal soul won't do. Right. It's not interested in it. So where did that come from? It comes from the fact that you're living among non-Jews and you pick up things.
Right.
This is just nature of the world. The same thing is apparently the last one, lo tachmod. But go before that and say, it says lo tirtzach, lo tinaf.
Yeah.
Lo tignov.
Those are not titles of my opinion.
So there it's very interesting. I don't want to get into it, but it's a very big discussion about how is that written. And it's not written lo tignov. It's not written lo tinaf. It's not written lo tirtzach. How is it written? It's written lo tignov. Lo, there's a psik tama. There's a halt, almost a full stop, as we call it, in between the not and the verb. So you shall not, period, murder. You shall not have relations with a woman. Tinaf really means to have relations with a woman. It doesn't mean to commit adultery. It's wrong in translation. You shall not steal. So the Medrash says about this. The Zohar is very big on this, but the Medrash already says it, and there's a lot of discussion about it. It says, why is this full stop there? Because sometimes you have to. Oh, what do you mean? Where did I hear so? It says if it would say you shall not have relations with a woman,
you can't get married.
You can't get married. You won't have children. It's telling you there are certain situations in which you cannot, and certain situations in which you can and you have to. Same thing is about do not murder. So you have to defend yourself sometimes.
Right.
So you can't say do not murder. Period. That would be a Christian misinterpretation. It would be common for them to misinterpret it that way. The same thing with lo tignov. You shall not steal. And sometimes there it's talking about stealing a soul, meaning putting a person into slavery. And then sometimes you have to. Why? Because he has debts, and the only other option is for him to, for them to kill him. I don't know what they'll do to him. So you have to. So these things.
Sneaking half an hour to the shitters.
Good.
In the middle of your working day.
That's stealing.
It's technically stealing.
Good.
But it's mutar.
Good. Anyway, so the Aseres Dibros is not necessarily just for the divine soul. It's not necessarily for the Jewish animal soul. It's not necessarily just for the. It's for what we also call the influences from outside. In any case, so that could be from the Jewish animal soul. You're allowed to have more than one wife. Just the fact that we have this cherem, said we all agree to it, and we don't do anything differently. And if you do, you're a little crazy today. But the nature hasn't changed. The animal soul is still the animal soul, and it's allowed to have more than one wife. So maybe sometimes it wants to, but if it's a woman who's married, so then he can't.
It's a different story.
What?
A different story. That's a different story.
Okay, I'm saying that comes from foreign influence. That comes from something else. That's not from the simple craving inside. Okay.
Should be that those cravings and that influence should reduce when you learn to see this. But in fact, what happened was, as I became from, so suddenly I discovered all of these things that I'd never even heard about, never thought about. They suddenly appeared out of nowhere. All sorts of strange things.
Because now they became usher. They became forbidden.
What did?
These strange things. I don't know if I understand you correctly. You suddenly find cravings that you didn't know you had.
Right.
Okay, so I'm saying, because until now, this wasn't prohibited. When something becomes prohibited, that's when the other side begins to get interested. But you didn't know. You didn't know.
No, but as you learn more and more Hasidus, suddenly you find there's more and more things, that are attractive, which before were never attractive, which is weird,
What I think really happens is that people don't realize that they're attracted to it. And suddenly when it comes to the foreground, and suddenly you hear about it, they say, oh, wait a minute, I'm attracted to this. I didn't know I was so attracted. But you were probably all along. It could be, again, it's because it became prohibited and becomes more interesting. Like anything, you tell somebody, don't think about an elephant. Okay. But the simpler thing is, the moment you tell somebody don't think about an elephant, the first thing they'll think about is an elephant. Because that's how the mind works.
Okay. And that's very, very interesting, deep subject. It's not just
okay. So these things, let's take the example that you talked about before we started the recording.
Yeah.
In the end, people don't really believe that they're fighting a battle. They think the battles are to make my livelihood. The battles are to, the neighbor wants to take my little plot of land and stuff like that. But they don't realize it. They don't understand the battle inside. And the truth is, usually, even the people who really understand Chassidus, understand what they're up against, they miss that. They don't get it. They don't understand that when they wake up in the morning, they're in a battle. They don't get it. So a person will not recognize that this craving that he has to eat, a steak tonight, is something he doesn't need. He won't recognize it. He'll say, I deserve it. I worked hard all day. He doesn't get it. He doesn't see that he doesn't need to eat that animal. I'm not saying again to be a vegetarian at all. I think you should eat meat on Shabbos when it's a different story. But you don't need it during the week. You don't need it. Maybe once a week. You need fish, whatever. People don't see it. They don't see that I could fast a lot if I needed to cleanse myself.
You don't have to go to fasting. Right?
You think that's an extreme?
Some people is hard.
Okay.
But my
to
wife,
fast is even
makes me a diet where she carefully works out.
That's called fasting.
Good for you. Right?
That's fasting. Because I'm not going to eat all the processed foods.
Right, so that's what it says in the Gemara. The wife is the one who keeps you on a straight and level.
Right. And so people say, no, I don't want that. I want my Danish. I want my this. I want my that. They don't understand that that's a battle. It's a battle you can win. Right. It's not even that difficult if you only realize that it's a real battle that will define what kind of life you're going to have. I mean, because from there it goes to everything else. It starts from what you eat and mostly what you eat. In our generation, this, I've told you many times, I think the Yetzer Hara today is in the supermarket.
Oh yeah,
and a person who's...
I've seen it and recognized it. You walk in, the entrance...
The whole thing is a marketing scheme to get you to eat more sugar, oil, and salt. That's what it is. Processed foods. That's how they make their money. And I'm not telling them not to make their money. I'm not telling them what to do. But I'm telling us what to eat. I have to advocate for the good guy. I don't have to say the other guy's a bad guy. I have to tell you, look, you can be better. And you can. You can control these urges. If you just understand that the body that really wants this, and it's permissible, is fighting a battle. And it's up to you to help the body win, because the body's not going to win by itself. You have to do the work.
You have to go one of the cleverest things that my wife says is to say, I'm never going to eat any of that food ever. It's stupid, because then that's the best way to fall.
Because?
That's the best way to fall.
Right.
You like ice cream?
Yeah, it's day to day.
So you have a piece of ice cream on Shabbos. You don't lock it in the cupboard.
Put it off to Shabbos. Put everything off to Shabbos. On Shabbos you're too tired anyway. You should be learning. You don't have time to eat. Anyway. ויש לצאת המלחמה עליהם. הם האויבים האמיתיים של האדם. They're the true enemies that you have. What he's also saying here is that don't believe the world. Don't believe what the world shows you, that the enemy is on the outside. Any enemy. Understand that if you're sort of like, if you're so afraid of Iran, let's say today in Israel, you're so afraid of Iran, what a terrible enemy. So you're completely diverted in your mind. You don't realize the real battle that you have to fight, which is right in front of you. You can't see what's going on in your own streets. You don't understand that people are walking around terrified. Not here, maybe in Yerushalayim so much, but go to Beersheba, go south and see how they're living. You can't live. The Bedouins have taken over everything. I'm talking about the roads. You can't drive down the road. People are terrified. So is it really as bad as the media makes it? No, it's about 80% less. But still, that 20% is enough to make your life unbearable. Because people shouldn't live in that situation. Go to Yaffo, it's the same thing. What's going on? Oh, because we have this great big enemy called Iran. Who cares about Iran? If you put your enemy on the outside, you miss the real battle that you have to wage day by day. In all levels of life, that's true. And it's especially true when it comes to the psychology of the person. If you think it's these big things that you need to take care of, and those are your big issues, you're missing out on your real problems. You don't get it. Your real problems are very small, but they're right in front of you. Because they're part of you, there is no interest in breaking them and shattering them. We only want to rectify them. In other words, for the body not to eat these things, for me to get over the urge, is not some kind of suffering for the body. On the contrary, it's a rectification for it. The same thing for the animal soul. That I might think, oh, I'm going to be sick because I'm going to fight against my animal soul. It's exactly the opposite. You're sick because you don't fight against it. I know that in the beginning they tell you, like, that's what you think. You've been conditioned to think that if you don't give in, you're going to have, or let's put it the other way. If you repress these urges, they're going to come back and bite your head off. It's simply not true. It's a misunderstanding of Freud, of everything. Nobody ever said that if you do. On the contrary, defense mechanisms are great. You have to have them. If you don't have them, you're not alive. You can't function. The problem is when they break down for some reason. But you have to have the ability to repress urges. Otherwise, you're not a civilized human being. It still requires a battle. Because it's not so easy to rectify them. They don't want to be rectified. And again, the image, why is it called an animal soul? It's because it's like taking an ox and plowing the field with it. The ox doesn't know from the field, and it doesn't care about the person with that's putting the reins on him. He wants to go home and eat. That's what he's interested in. But I told you the story, I think on Friday, about Reb Kahat and the horse with the bit. Yeah. The horse thinks you're putting the bit inside me so I don't forget how to eat. On the way we're going to travel to Leipzig or where we were going. Because you spend the first 13 years of your life naturally listening. What does that mean? That the person finds it hard in the first 13 years of their life to understand how to look at themselves objectively. It's very hard for them. It's very hard to look at themselves objectively. They live the subjective moment. They can't see themselves from the outside. But when you're 13, you begin to understand that you can begin to contemplate yourself as an object. You can begin to contemplate your life. You can begin to contemplate what's happening to you. You begin to understand where you're living, where you are. That's why it says, when you go out to war, why go out? Because to begin to do the war, you have to leave your subjective point of view. That's what it means when you go out. What are you going out of? You're going out of your subjective point of view. In your subjective point of view, the animal soul and the body are you. And all you see is that. You can't see something from the outside. That's why, what's the first mitzvah that we do? We talk to Hashem. The second mitzvah we do, we put on tefillin. The next morning, you put on tefillin. Why do you put the tefillin on? Because the tefillin, the way they're built, they encourage, they foster objective perspective on life. That's what they're meant to do. The tefillin are a shortcut to self-knowledge. I can look at myself from the outside. That's what they do. That's their purpose. How do I know this? Because that's what it says. It says that when you put the parshas, you put the scrolls inside the tefillin, you put them miyamin lakoreh. You put them as if somebody from the outside is reading them in order. What do you mean somebody from the outside? I'm the one putting them on. Because they're meant to give you the perspective of looking at yourself from the outside. That's a very big deal. If you only start looking at yourself objectively, okay, we have to daven, we promise you, God will deliver him into your hands. And you will win. The moment you can look at yourself objectively, you will win. There's no question that you will win. And you will gain all the sparks of holiness that are in your animal soul and in your body that are waiting to be elevated. That is what it means to capture what he's captured, because the sparks were captured by the sparks of holiness were initially captured by the body and the animal soul, and now you're freeing them, so you're capturing what was captured. And we'll continue, God willing, tomorrow morning.